Mr Speaker, the Coalition's vote against the privatisation of Sydney Airport and the other airports will be a defining moment in John Howard's leadership of the opposition. This is the person who's told us that the third runway in Sydney should have been built. This is the person who said all this scare talk about noise is an exaggeration. I've lived there. This is the person who consistently pressed the government to build it, who's out there telling the business community we need more microeconomic reform, and in the principle microeconomic reform of airport services in this country, that is the privatisation of them, their capital adequacy, the addition to capacity. He's held it hostage. For what reason? Because he's got a thin margin in his own seat, because of his own miserable seat.
I might say this is the same leader of the opposition whose bombing raid on Sydney only this week involved that great private members bill, the great private members bill that allows for 24-hour uninterrupted operations on the east-west runway without a curfew. The same private members bill that described the eastern approaches as the western approaches and the western approaches as the eastern approaches. Surprise, surprise, it dumps all of the traffic to the east and the west and the south of the airport. But it limits movements to the north. It limits movements to the north. That is, it limits movements over the electorate of the Leader of the Opposition. And guess what it limits it to? It limits it to less than 1% of the total movements at the airport. Indeed, here is the map that accompanied the proposal with the new flight paths. The blue represents John Howard's electorate. And all of these complex flight paths down here, they represent...
Order. The Minister has made the point. He will put that down. The Minister has made the point.
That's where the blue bloods live. That's where the blue bloods live, on the Bennelong Peninsula.
He talks about microeconomic change. When they ask him these questions, he's always going to improve the ports and the wharves. He's going to improve the infrastructure. He's going to hop into the unions. He's going to do all these tough things. But in the biggest single microeconomic reform in the state of New South Wales, the third runway at Mascot Airport, what's he do? He hocks the whole thing for a few votes at his own seat of Bennelong. Now, Mr Speaker, if the business community need any proof that this person is a completely straw man, here they have the gateway to Australia, the greatest microeconomic change in civil aviation in this country in 20 years. And what's he want to do? Cut its efficiency virtually in half to pick up a few votes in his own seat, which he's won reasonably comfortably since he came here in 1974. This is not as if there's 5 or 6 seats sitting around the airport and you can say, well, look, there's a bit of low rent politics here. But this is so low, you'd need a pair of binoculars to find it, Mr Speaker. I mean, this is about a handful of votes in Bennelong. And I don't think the airport noise people are going to take any notice of this ritual and late incantation. I don't think so.
Sure not.
It's not a case of airport noise problem here. It's the member of Bennelong's Portnoy's complaint. Portnoy's complaint. He's got the Portnoy's complaint, Mr Speaker.